A Dark Order member collapses in terror, announcing that their worst nightmare has arrived. The panicked cultist urges his smug-looking companion to escape the now compromised location. The clueless gray-haired leader asks who they're running from, clearly not reading the room. The main character is revealed with his epic titles, leading an army of the undead. The cultist explains the main character is here specifically to eradicate the Dark Order. He vividly imagines the gruesome death awaiting them at the hands of undead monsters. The overconfident leader dismisses the fear, about to make a very foolish boast. He brags about having the best Holy Knight Order on their side for protection. The panicked man screams in despair, knowing the horrible truth about those very knights. The main character appears with the Holy Knights, now his personal undead puppets. Whoops. The main character casually gives the order for his new undead puppets to attack. The undead Holy Knights obediently fire a holy energy blast at their former allies. The undead knights mindlessly execute their orders, their faces frozen in silent screams. The clueless leader and the panicked cultist watch as their followers are instantly vaporized. The rest of the undead army swarms forward, overwhelming the terrified cultists. An undead Holy Knight tackles the clueless leader, ending his reign of bad decisions. The once arrogant leader is now on the floor bleeding and pathetically begging for mercy. He questions how undead could serve a necromancer, as if he wasn't just using them. The main character grabs the leader's face, clearly tired of hearing him talk. The leader starts desperately praying for salvation. A little late for that now. The main character places a holy artifact on the leader's head, offering his own brand of salvation. He executes the leader with a blast of divine power, a truly ironic and fitting end. The leader writhes as the holy power he coveted literally burns his dark soul from the inside out. A flashback reveals a younger main character, vowing to send people to hell with God's own blessing. The holy artifact flares with immense power, delivering a final, divine judgment on the cult leader. The story shifts to the Holy Kingdom, where gossips are busy slandering the exiled 7th Prince. Rumors paint the young 7th Prince, our MC, as a moral degenerate without a conscience. The gossips recall a specific scandalous incident involving the prince and a high-ranking archbishop. A flashback shows the prince being publicly accused of harassing an archbishop's daughter. The narration claims he made things worse by refusing to accept punishment for the obvious setup. The young prince responds to the setup by vandalizing the archbishop's room with blood. The Holy Emperor crushes his throne's armrest, enraged by his son's public defiance. The emperor exiles his son to the land of the dead. A truly terrible idea. The prince's place of reflection is a frozen wasteland, basically a death sentence. The rumors escalate, claiming the prince attempted suicide after being rejected by a girl. The gossip continues, showing his survival from the supposed suicide attempt as fortunate. After surviving, the prince is shown as a changed person, hinting at a new soul. The new prince is now a model citizen, working diligently at the monastery. His sudden change makes him popular, but also draws suspicion from the more observant townspeople. The rumors get closer to the truth, suggesting demonic possession and walking corpses. The main character holds a town hall meeting with his undead, asking for their honest opinions. One of his most articulate undead minions responds with a thoughtful, yet entirely skeletal creak. The main character processes this insightful feedback with the dead-eyed stare of a man in charge. A system window helpfully confirms his identity as Alan, the exiled Necromancer prince. Alan complains about the system's pop-up notifications, a struggle even for necromancers. He explains to his undead that the rumors started because people noticed them, walking. He sarcastically worries about being wrongly accused of heresy while literally commanding corpses. The big reveal: he's an isekai protagonist from Korea who possessed the prince's body post-suicide. He demonstrates his game-like ability to see status windows for his individually numbered zombies. He dramatically explains how he used his necromancy skills to land a job as a graveyard keeper. Alan explains to his undead that his entire operation is considered heresy here. He sarcastically asks his undead minions if he should stop, feigning concern for their opinion. A flashback shows his zombie crew working as a highly efficient grave-digging team. He proudly finishes the job by placing a gravestone literally engraved with "Made by Zombie." Alan reminisces about what a beautiful, productive day of desecration it was. His undead minions are so moved by the memory they start sniffing back tears. He abruptly changes the mood, suggesting it's time to say goodbye to his undead staff. The zombies throw a full-blown tantrum, becoming zomgry at the thought of being fired. One of the zombies gives him a rebellious glare, clearly preparing to unionize. Alan begins his villain monologue, starting with his complex first life as a Korean. Alan claims he wants a peaceful second life, a statement nobody believes for a second. He caves to his zombies' tantrum, reconsidering their employment status out of friendship. Alan sighs in resignation as his undead employees celebrate their successful emotional manipulation. With the labor dispute settled, Alan immediately puts his highly motivated undead crew back to work. Two shady-looking men appear, immediately raising the local imminent trouble index. The men are transporting corpses in a cart, which is never a sign of good intentions. One of the men uses the corpses as a motivational tool for his clearly terrified partner. Their plan is to find the prince to help their cursed village, a truly terrible idea. A terrifying bloodshot eye spies on the proceedings because this town wasn't creepy enough. The mysterious observer seems very interested in the number of available corpses for some reason. The two desperate men confirm their village is now just a collection of conveniently available corpses. The villagers ask Alan to visit their cursed town, a request he rightfully questions. They explain they feel safe around him because they've seen him moving corpses, a terrible reference. The men resort to begging and physically clinging to Alan, who is visibly annoyed by the contact. They continue their pathetic whining, convinced the blasphemy prince is their only hope for survival. Alan's mood darkens as he finally agrees to help, asking what they expect him to do. The trio arrives at the desolate village, which looks like it was designed by a plague enthusiast. Alan steps into a gross puddle, dryly noting that the village is indeed quite scary. The villagers use Alan as a human shield, warning him about hazards while clinging to him. Alan finally loses his patience, asking if they think he's some kind of good luck charm. Alan tells his cowardly human shields to stop clinging to him and actually search. A sudden noise spooks the villagers, who immediately try to dismiss it as a rat. Alan decides to investigate alone, much to the horror of the men who just hired him. Even our Necromancer prince gets a bad feeling, which is a terrible sign for everyone else. He confirms his suspicion, sensing a murderous aura from the unseen presence. Something suddenly grabs Alan from behind, proving his bad feeling was 100% correct. The source of the terrifying murderous aura is revealed to be a single tiny rat. Alan stares in utter confusion at the rat, which is posing like a bodybuilder. The rat's eyes glow a demonic red, confirming it was never just a rat. An entire horde of monstrous red-eyed rats erupts from the darkness, ready to attack. The lead monstrous rat fires a red energy beam from its mouth directly at Alan. Alan identifies the horde as zombie rats while desperately fending them off with his shovel. He realizes this pestilence is the village's curse and starts cleaning house with his shovel. Alan channels holy power into his shovel, screaming as he obliterates the rats with a shockwave. He stands amidst the carnage, having instantly pacified the entire horde with one attack. Alan looks confused as the surviving rats have completely stopped their assault on him. The remaining zombie rats now cower before him, squeaking in what looks like submission. He panics as the rats swarm him again, this time with reverence, and tries to refuse kingship. Alan is immediately overwhelmed and dogpiled by his new overly affectionate undead followers. The sheer weight of his adoring rat fans pushes him straight into the town's well. Alan screams at his new rat followers while his shovel glows with holy power underwater. He activates a skill from the bottom of the well, accusing the rats of attempted murder by affection. Alan casts a necromancy spell called Swamp of Death to get some much-needed personal space. The two villagers finally peek into the well, arriving just in time to be confused and useless. They marvel as the Swamp of Death accidentally becomes a pool of holy water, praising Alan. Alan realizes his necromancy skills have unexpected holy side effects, much to his own surprise. He connects his holy power to his royal lineage, finally explaining the purification phenomenon. Alan smugly embraces his new title as a holy necromancer, explaining his polite zombie staff. The villagers spot a young girl named Charlotte, shocked to see another survivor in the desolate town. Charlotte ignores the villagers' concerned questions while ominously hiding a bloody knife from view. Charlotte attacks the villagers with glowing red eyes, dropping the innocent survivor act immediately. Alan blocks Charlotte's knife strike, saving the useless villager he was hired to protect. He questions if the girl is a zombie, finally connecting the dots in this cursed village. Alan shoves her back, noting her tool use means she's not a mindless undead. He correctly deduces that Charlotte is only partially zombified, stuck in a horrifying transition. The girl cries out in agony, managing to call for her mother through the corruption. Alan listens as she asks for her parents, a brief moment of humanity before the horror resumes. Charlotte loses control again, lunging at Alan with her knife in a frenzy. Alan catches the blade with his bare hand, which starts glowing with his signature holy power. The divine energy travels up the knife, about to give Charlotte a dose of holy purification. Alan confirms his holy power burns the undead on contact, a useful but painful discovery. He hesitates to continue the attack, realizing it will cause Charlotte immense pain. Alan tackles Charlotte directly into the well he just turned into a holy water font. He holds the screaming girl down in the water, telling her to endure the forced purification. Alan pins the convulsing Charlotte as the holy water violently exorcises her corruption. The holy necromancer looks completely drained after performing his aggressive, full-immersion baptism. Charlotte floats peacefully, her humanity restored after being forcibly dezombified by Alan. The narration reveals that news of his rat-purging incident has already begun to spread. New villagers beg for help, but Alan coldly denies ever saving a person. Alan firmly shuts down the villagers' request, clearly not interested in becoming a hero. Alan lies through his teeth, coldly telling the villagers that the girl they heard about died. The desperate villagers react with predictable shock, completely buying his terrible deadpan lie. Alan doubles down on his useless prince act, claiming he has no powers to help them. The villagers fall into despair, lamenting that their last hope is apparently a fraud. An enthusiastic man bursts in at the worst possible time, about to blow Alan's cover. The man joyfully announces that Charlotte is awake, completely torpedoing Alan's carefully crafted lie. He then proceeds to give Alan all the credit, turning him into a local hero against his will. The villagers turn on Alan with angry glares, having caught him in his very obvious deception. Alan gives up on the charade with visible annoyance, his plan to be left alone ruined. He reluctantly agrees to help, flexing his superior divine power with absolutely zero humility. Alan agrees to help the desperate villagers, but immediately adds a few non-negotiable conditions. He uses his system to scan the lead villager, Parlock, confirming he's dealing with a suspicious old man. Alan calls out their hypocrisy, questioning why they'd trust a trashy prince they clearly doubt. His first demand is simple. He's not a volunteer, so pay up with money and supplies. His second demand is for the villagers to provide free labor to fix his entire crumbling cathedral. Alan expertly manipulates them by threatening to walk away, forcing their immediate and desperate agreement. The villagers are horrified to learn there's yet another condition to their supposed salvation. Alan's final condition is to keep this whole deal a secret from the Holy Knights. He internally celebrates his successful scam, finally finding a use for his place of exile. Alan confirms the zombie count is 30, casually deciding the job is well within his capabilities. Alan smirks as he orders his newly conscripted villagers to grab their gear. He sarcastically asks if they really expected him to fight the zombies all by himself. Alan assigns them frontline duty while he handles the holy prayer, looking entirely untrustworthy. The terrified villagers finally realize they've made a deal with an absolute demon. A villager is interrupted by ominous growling because the situation wasn't bad enough. The villagers scream in terror as the zombie horde has already followed them to the cathedral. Alan rallies his new meat shields, telling them to grab mops if they have to. A massive horde of zombies is shown approaching, silhouetted against a blood-red sky. The close-up reveals a sea of undead, confirming the villagers' estimate was hilariously wrong. Alan yells at Parlock, who pathetically admits he miscounted the zombies while running for his life. Alan punches a zombie directly in the face, deciding to handle the horde personally. The conscripted villagers panic, barely holding their own against the endless sea of undead. Alan struggles to fend off a zombie with a stick, proving he's better at magic than melee. A system window appears as Alan activates a skill, infusing his shovel with holy water. He unleashes Swamp of Death, which ironically purifies the zombies in a holy water tsunami. A flashback begins as Alan explains he was already a necromancer before this whole isekai business. He reveals he was a beta tester who chose the Necromancer class in a VR game for money. The narration explains his tragic cliché death by electrocution from his gaming setup. He confirms his game skills conveniently transferred over, giving him a head start in his new life. Alan explains the prince's innate divine power accidentally merged with his necromancy skills. Alan explains that his necromancy skills are unintentionally holy, leaking divine power with every use. He looks at his useless meat shields and correctly assesses that they absolutely cannot handle this. One of the conscripted villagers has a breakdown, admitting he can't fight his former neighbors. The villager spots his zombified wife in the horde, making this the worst family reunion ever. His zombie wife approaches and reaches for his face as he freezes, paralyzed by sentimentality. The zombie wife gives him a final, menacing caress before deciding he looks delicious. She finally drops the act and lunges forward with a demonic scream, ready to eat her husband. Alan interrupts the tragic reunion by delivering a flying kick directly to the zombie wife's head. The villager screams in despair as his undead wife is unceremoniously knocked to the ground. Alan tells the man to stop overreacting over a corpse, proving his empathy is non-existent. Alan shoves his shovel at the zombie wife, demanding the sentimental villager face the ugly truth. He gives the man a brutal choice: run away or put his undead wife out of her misery. Alan's tough love speech is interrupted by a massive zombie lunging directly at his face. The monster grabs Alan, who looks genuinely shocked to be caught off guard for once. A mysterious figure descends from the sky in a flash of light, arriving just in time. The newcomer, a white-haired woman, makes a superhero landing that shatters the stone pavement. She effortlessly crushes a zombie's head with her bare hand, establishing her power level immediately. The mysterious woman calmly asks Alan if he's okay, completely ignoring the surrounding chaos. A flashback begins, with narration explaining the land was once consumed by a seasonal plague. The narration reveals a young girl, likely the woman, once believed her mother's lies about survival. The flashback shows a young girl, the white-haired woman, screaming for her parents in terror. She runs to the door, frantically warning her family about the horde of rats outside. The girl realizes with dawning horror that all the rats have the same demonic red eyes. She witnesses her zombified father attacking her mother in a gruesome, bloody scene. Her dying father, now a zombie, weakly tells his daughter Charlotte to run for her life. Young Charlotte turns to see her mother has also succumbed to the zombie plague. The zombified mother growls menacingly, confirming the family reunion is officially over. The narration explains Charlotte's memory conveniently blacks out after her parents try to eat her. The flashback shows her fleeing her zombified parents inside and a horde of rats outside. She recalls grabbing a knife to defend herself, explaining the weapon Alan found her with. The flashback continues with the gruesome, bloody aftermath of Charlotte's parents turning on each other. Young Charlotte sits in shock, covered in blood, as the shadows of her undead parents loom over her. Her narration confirms her partial zombification as one of her eyes glows a demonic red. She realizes the zombie rats now ignore her, making her question if she's becoming a monster too. Charlotte resigns herself to her fate, believing there is no one left to save her from the horror. In a moment of despair, she desperately wishes for just one person to come to her rescue. Her memory flashes to Alan holding her down in the well, his version of a rescue mission. She recalls Alan's aggressive baptism in the holy water as his only method of saving her. The flashback ends as Charlotte wakes up in bed, confused by the violent memory of her salvation. A villager informs the disoriented Charlotte that Alan saved her and is currently fighting zombies outside. Charlotte processes the news about the prince fighting zombies, looking completely bewildered after waking up. She watches Alan's silhouette from the window, hearing him scream at the villagers to fight back. Charlotte looks on with intense concern, realizing the prince who saved her is in mortal danger. She remembers her desperate wish for a savior, finally connecting it to Alan's violent rescue mission. Ignoring the villagers' protests, Charlotte makes a break for the door to join the fight herself. The mysterious woman's dramatic entrance is shown again, shattering the pavement with her landing. She casually crushes a zombie's skull with her bare hand, making it look ridiculously easy. The woman calmly checks on Alan, completely unfazed by the horde of undead surrounding them. Standing over Alan's fallen form, the mysterious woman declares her intention to save everyone. Alan stares in absolute disbelief, completely baffled by his sudden, overpowered, and unknown rescuer. Alan stares at the mountain of zombie corpses, wondering how Charlotte managed to solo the entire horde. Alan gets internally salty as the villagers worship Charlotte, completely forgetting he was fighting first. He correctly guesses his holy water purification accidentally gave Charlotte a massive power-up. Alan admits he's clueless about his own powers before ordering the villagers to bury their dead. The sentimental villager agrees with Alan, finally ready to face the grim task ahead of him. The villagers find their resolve, determined to put their zombified loved ones to rest for good. Alan offers to help with the cleansing ritual, showing a rare and suspicious moment of empathy. The narration explains a funeral ritual is meant to help the souls of the dead finally move on. Alan explains the ritual prevents spirits from wandering, basically doing his job on a grander scale. He reveals his ability to interact with the dead is a key reason for his original exile. Alan reflects that his exile was a convenient way for the Empire to get a zombie janitor. He narrows his eyes, realizing the official story for his exile doesn't quite add up. Alan reviews historical records, finding the current zombie outbreak suspiciously widespread and fast. He concludes this isn't a natural disaster, as it's too early for the wave of death. Parlock, the village chief, oversees the burials while being called over by Alan. Alan questions Parlock about strange visitors, but the old man claims nothing was out of place. He connects the timing of the plague's start to a deliberate, intentional act of malice. Alan's casual question about a necromancer sends Parlock and the villagers into a full-blown panic. He tries to backtrack, claiming he was just mumbling while the villagers freak out about demons. Alan sarcastically apologizes for his very existence as a villager screams about disgusting necromancers. Alan theorizes the enemy necromancer is nearby, conveniently admitting he has no way to find them. Alan immediately clocks out for the day, delegating the rest of the work to the villagers. He internally rejects his royal status, insisting he's just a simple exploited laborer. Alan's shadow moves across the wall as he finally heads off to get some rest. He gets comfortable in bed with the smug look of a man who successfully avoided more work. Alan decides to rest after the exhausting funeral, completely unaware his vacation is already over. A loud bang jolts Alan awake, proving that peace and quiet are not in his contract. A villager frantically screams about a kidnapping, ruining Alan's much-needed beauty sleep. The villager clarifies that zombies kidnapped someone, a development Alan looks utterly unprepared for. Parlock and the other villagers confirm the story, swearing they saw the whole thing happen. A villager explains the zombies attacked while everyone was exhausted from the all-night funeral. Two villagers look around the graveyard in panic, completely clueless about the new chaos unfolding. They recall seeing a woman named Morian running for her life, screaming for help from the zombies. Alan asks who Morian is, and a villager identifies her as the local herb gatherer. The villager continues describing Morian's helpful nature, as Alan wonders why he should know her. The villager awkwardly tries to jog Alan's memory by mentioning she's a beauty. He finally reveals Morian is the girl who rejected the original prince's confession, triggering Alan's secondhand embarrassment. Alan cuts the villager off, demanding he stop recounting the prince's pathetic and humiliating past. Alan internally scoffs at the villager's sudden motivation, correctly guessing it's only because she's pretty. Despite his annoyance, Alan's expression hardens as he decides he has to investigate the kidnapping anyway. Alan internally notes that zombies kidnapping people is a new and deeply suspicious development. Alan prepares to leave as a villager suggests a local hunter might actually be useful for once. The villagers are suddenly brave and eager to depart, motivated entirely by the pretty damsel in distress. Alan impatiently orders the villagers to go get the hunter, clearly done with the small talk. A tiny, intimidating Charlotte appears and stares Alan down, halting his departure plans. Charlotte continues her intense, silent stare-down with Alan, who looks mildly confused by the attention. Alan nervously wonders if Charlotte is holding a grudge for his violent, full-immersion purification. Alan uses the urgency of the kidnapping as a perfect excuse to flee his awkward encounter with Charlotte. Charlotte is left standing alone, completely speechless as her would-be mentor ditches her mid-stare. The hunter leads them to a creepy cave, confirming the zombies dragged their victim inside. A villager congratulates the hunter, Hans, for successfully leading them to the obviously evil cave. Alan internally gives the hunter a rare compliment for his competent tracking skills. He senses the cave is radiating demonic energy, correctly guessing it's the source of the plague. Alan deduces the kidnapping confirms a mastermind is controlling the zombies, just as he suspected. Alan suggests arson as a first resort, forgetting the damsel in distress until a villager panics. He explains the cave buff's undead, warning his meat shields they'll become an all-you-can-eat buffet. Alan expertly manipulates the villagers by suggesting retreat, casually mentioning Morian will probably die. A sudden growl interrupts his scheming, because this man is not allowed a single moment of peace. A monstrous zombie bear with glowing red eyes ambushes Alan, who is once again caught off guard. The villagers scream for the prince as he's attacked, providing their usual level of tactical support. Alan gets a chunk taken out of his shoulder by the zombie bear, looking more pissed than pained. The villagers immediately abandon Alan, proving their meat shield title is well earned. The zombie bear flings Alan across the cave, confirming that animal zombies are a huge problem. Bleeding and airborne, Alan activates a skill, because his shovel is his only reliable partner. He unleashes Swamp of Death, giving the zombie bear an unsolicited and painful holy water bath. Alan hits the ground hard, clutching his wound as another skill window conveniently pops up. He activates Terrible Curse, which sounds like the absolute opposite of what you'd want for a wound. Alan explains his curse skills become heals, a convenient side effect of his holy necromancy. The holy water apparently just made the bear angry, as it now looms over him menacingly. A system scan reveals this isn't just a zombie bear, but the King of Gluttony. Alan realizes the zombie bear is buffed by necromancy, which explains its holy water resistance. He has a rare moment of self-awareness, admitting he can't beat a giant bear with brute force. The King of Gluttony immediately proves his point by swatting Alan into a cave wall. The zombie bear lunges at the downed Alan, ready to make him its next meal. Charlotte makes a dramatic entrance, dropping from the ceiling to stab the bear in the head. She looks genuinely surprised that a knife to the brain didn't instantly stop the monster. The King of Gluttony thrashes wildly, clearly more annoyed than injured by the head stabbing. Alan peeks from his hiding spot, shocked that the girl he tried to ditch followed him. He immediately starts barking orders at his rescuer, telling Charlotte to hold the bear down. The bear promptly throws Charlotte to the ground, proving Alan's tactical advice is still garbage. Charlotte gets unceremoniously slammed into the cave wall, learning bears are generally stronger than little girls. The King of Gluttony looms over Charlotte, ready to see if she tastes better than she fights. She desperately shoves her knife into the bear's jaw, a tactic that is both brave and incredibly stupid. The bear chomps down on her arm, proving that its teeth are, in fact, sharper than her knife. Her hand suddenly erupts with holy light, giving the bear a surprise facial of divine energy. The holy explosion sends the massive bear flying, much to the complete and utter shock of Charlotte. Alan condescendingly praises Charlotte for buying him time, offering a hand to his human shield. Charlotte stares in horror at Alan's offered hand, which now looks suspiciously gray and undead. She internally panics, wondering if Alan got turned into a zombie in the 2 minutes she wasn't looking. Alan reveals his master plan by raising an army of zombies, finally showing his necromancer hand. Charlotte stares in utter disbelief, trying to reconcile her savior with the necromancer standing before her. Alan flashes a smug, glowing-eyed grin, clearly enjoying his long-awaited villain monologue moment. Alan and Charlotte stand behind their new zombie army as it charges the King of Gluttony. The King of Gluttony roars as it's swarmed by Alan's disposable undead meat shields. The zombie horde proves surprisingly effective, managing to land some solid hits on the massive bear. Alan's holy zombies dogpile the King of Gluttony, attempting to restrain the much larger monster. Alan explains that the bear's high body count conveniently provided him with plenty of summoning material. He internally notes the bear's durability is useless against his overwhelming numbers, a classic Necromancer flex. The King of Gluttony is shown brutally mauled, proving that quantity has a quality all its own. Alan calmly faces the mangled bear, looking completely unimpressed by the monster he's about to destroy. The King of Gluttony's head is graphically obliterated, ending the fight in a shower of gore. The massive zombie bear collapses, finally defeated by Alan's overwhelming zombie horde. Charlotte and an exhausted Alan stand over the corpse, the unlikely duo who survived the boss fight. Alan internally states the obvious outcome of the fight with a look of pure exhaustion. Charlotte rushes to Alan's side with concern as he stumbles, finally feeling the backlash of his power. Alan lies about using divine power, while internally questioning if Charlotte followed him for revenge. He awkwardly admits to Charlotte that she's now seen his true necromancer abilities. Alan puts on a charming act, asking Charlotte to keep his secret so he can be a lazy exile. From Charlotte's perspective, she's completely captivated by her prince, totally buying his act. Alan is internally disgusted by her admiration, begging her to leave him alone so he can slack off. Charlotte pledges her undying loyalty to Alan, who has no idea why she thinks he's a hero. The cowardly villagers finally return, interrupting the moment with their predictably terrible timing. A villager yells down with fake concern, announcing they brought gear now that the danger is over. Alan watches them struggle down a rope and correctly concludes they will be absolutely no help. The villager gawks at the carnage, cluelessly asking who could have possibly defeated the monsters. He identifies the boss as the King of Gluttony, finally realizing the scale of the fight they skipped. Alan immediately invents a phantom necromancer to take all the credit and the blame. He shamelessly lies that they just stumbled upon the scene after the real necromancer left. The villagers instantly believe his story, while Alan internally mocks their simple-mindedness. Alan coldly concludes that Morian, the girl they came to save, is probably already dead. Alan continues his lie, claiming the phantom necromancer used Morian as bait for the bear. A villager asks what to do, so Alan decides they should investigate the cave further. Alan confidently confirms his decision, completely ignoring the villagers' well-founded fear. He smirks, admitting his real goal is to size up his supposed necromancer competition. Alan gives a baseless all clear before leading his disposable party deeper into the cave. The group ventures through the creepy cave, heading towards a suspiciously convenient light source. Alan, Charlotte, and the villagers peek around a corner, finally employing some basic caution. A villager spots something ahead, fulfilling his role as the designated panic and point guy. They find Morian alive and tied up, surrounded by ominous-looking magical talismans. A villager suddenly finds his courage and rushes to save Morian, much to Alan's annoyance. Alan internally questions why a necromancer would leave their bait alive, his suspicion finally kicking in. His eyes glow with insight as the tied-up Morian calls out to the prince, confirming it's a trap. Morian puts on a masterful damsel-in-distress performance, complete with tears and a sparkly background. Alan immediately swings his shovel and knocks out the villager who was rushing to save her. The villager gets a face full of shovel for his heroic efforts, proving no good deed goes unpunished. The remaining villagers and Charlotte stare in absolute shock at Alan's sudden, friendly fire incident. Alan stands over the unconscious villager, having successfully neutralized his own liability. He coldly wishes he'd used the sharper side of the shovel, because of course he does. The other villagers ask Alan what's wrong, still completely clueless about the situation they're in. A system scan reveals Morian is a 63-year-old necromancer named Morgana, specializing in honey traps. Alan explains that Morian was the trap, not the bait, finally connecting the dots for his slow-witted audience. Morgana desperately pleads her innocence, but Alan warns the villagers not to fall for her terrible acting. He officially outs Morian as the necromancer, causing the villagers to have a collective delayed meltdown. Alan confirms her entire identity is a lie as Morgana's carefully crafted victim persona begins to crack. She sticks to her sob story, which Alan immediately dismisses with a level of sarcasm she clearly wasn't expecting. Alan calls out her manipulative nice girl act, completely unimpressed by the honey trap he almost fell for. He pulls out his all-purpose solution to everything, a conveniently prepared vial of holy water. He explains the simple test. It's either a healing potion for humans or an organ-melting cocktail for necromancers. Morgana tries to refuse the precious offer, sweating profusely as her escape options rapidly disappear. Alan goes full psycho mode, shoving the vial in her face and demanding she take her medicine. Morgana internally panics, wondering how Alan saw through her perfect disguise that fooled a village of idiots. She recalls her successful year-long infiltration, completely baffled that this damned prince exposed her so easily. Morgana eyes Alan and Charlotte, desperately trying to figure out what power he used to kill her pet bear. Alan snaps her out of her monologue, impatiently demanding she drink the holy water cocktail he prepared. He pulls rank, scolding her for not gratefully accepting a gift from royalty just before her face starts to melt. Morgana's disguise finally drops, revealing her true hag form as she admits she planned to kill him later. She launches a surprise attack which Alan blocks, shattering his gauntlet and the holy water vial. Morgana summons skeletal hands from the ground, mocking Alan for rushing into his own grave. She commands her new skeleton army, claiming she was doing him a favor by planning a less immediate death. Morgana laughs maniacally, completely confident that her generic skeletons can kill the guy who soloed a demon bear. Alan effortlessly shatters Morgana's skeletons with his shovel, telling the punks to back off. Morgana is ambushed from behind by Charlotte, whose demonic red eyes glow in the darkness. Charlotte expertly tackles the old necromancer, holding a knife to her throat before she can react. Alan praises Charlotte while casually patting a skeleton, much to Morgana's complete and utter confusion. Morgana asks if his shovel is a holy relic, and Alan sarcastically confirms shovels are just great. Alan mocks Morgana for worrying about his weapon instead of the knife currently at her throat. Charlotte glares down at Morgana, pressing the blade closer as a silent, deadly warning. A defeated Morgana formally introduces herself, admitting she has been apprehended again. The villagers demand a confession, one of them literally heartbroken that the pretty girl was a lie. Morgana begs for her life, offering to reveal who hired her to assassinate the prince. Morgana confesses her mission was to seduce the prince and fake his suicide. Alan is surprisingly indifferent, realizing the original prince wasn't as pathetic as he thought. Morgana reveals her client was the Dark Church, finally getting a real reaction out of Alan. Morgana tries to blackmail Alan, revealing she knows he's a necromancer too. Alan immediately decides to silence her, ordering Charlotte to execute the old necromancer. Morgana immediately backpedals, offering up intel on the Dark Church to save her own skin. Alan slaps her, dismissing her intel as worthless because she's offering it out of desperation. He leaves Morgana on the ground, declaring the villagers can decide what to do with her. The vengeful villagers surround Morgana, whose victims are now her jury and executioners. Alan coldly tells Morgana to pay for her sins, leaving her to the mercy of the mob. A villager suggests Morgana's punishment should fit her crimes as she begs for her life. The villager grimly proposes a painful death and leaving her corpse in the forest for the animals. The narration details their plan for Morgana to be eaten by wolves and then reanimate as a zombie. Alan casually agrees with the brutal sentence, dryly noting it's just another Tuesday in the Middle Ages. Alan contemplates the situation with a blank expression, already moving on to the next problem. His thoughts drift to the Dark Church, the mysterious organization Morgana mentioned before her sentencing. Alan's narration reveals he took the opportunity to loot all of Morgana's necromancy books. A chibi flashback shows Alan sneakily storing the stolen books in his inventory while no one was looking. Back in his room, Alan studies a book. Disappointed it doesn't have the spirit communication skill he wants. He pauses his reading, ready to dive into the dark secrets of his newly acquired necromancer library. Alan recalls Morgana's threat to kill him during the Wave of Death, finally connecting the dots. He decides to research the Wave of Death and the assassination plot in his newly acquired books. Alan immediately suspects his own royal siblings are the ones who ordered the hit on him. He concludes the battle for succession is the obvious motive for his family wanting him dead. Alan grips the stolen book, finally accepting he's been dragged into a political power struggle. He whines about the complicated life of royalty, suddenly worried about actually being murdered. Alan decides to grind his skills for survival, completely missing the glowing object on the stairs. Charlotte eavesdrops outside his door, looking alarmed as she learns he's an assassination target. She reflects on how everyone said the prince had changed, clearly seeing it as a positive. Charlotte remembers watching him fight the zombies, admiring his courage and leadership. Charlotte's internal monologue romanticizes Alan's actions, conveniently ignoring his self-serving motives. A villager tells Charlotte that Alan personally handled her parents' corpses, adding fuel to her hero worship. Charlotte tears up, completely sold on the noble prince fantasy that Alan despises. She clenches her fists, her resolve hardening as she commits to her misguided admiration. Charlotte watches Alan from afar, deciding a simple thank you isn't enough for her savior. She correctly deduces Alan is in danger and appoints herself as his personal meat shield. Charlotte conveniently finds an imperial swordsmanship guide, the perfect tool for her new career path. She picks up the book, officially beginning her training arc to protect the prince. Charlotte vows to become stronger, ready to defend the man who just wants to be left alone. The great prince is busy doodling on a window, completely oblivious to his new bodyguard's dramatic oath. Charlotte looks determined, clutching the swordsmanship guide that will turn her into a pint-sized killing machine. Meanwhile, the prince she swore to protect is busy defacing public property with his finger doodles. Alan's stolen reading material confirms the undead have a horrifyingly complex evolution tree. He flips the page, diving deeper into the necromancy lore his enemy conveniently left behind. The book explains that zombies can become skeletons, or if they're lucky, upgrade to ghouls. The undead career ladder continues from ghoul to Dullahan and eventually to vampire, getting smarter with each promotion. Apparently, darkness acts like a super steroid for zombies, speeding up their evolution with mana. The book reveals the ultimate destination for all zombies is a place called the Land of the Dead Spirits. This mass migration to cold lands to avoid rotting is the wave of death Alan's been worried about. The book reveals the wave of death climaxes on December 25th, the death anniversary of the Undead King. Alan closes the book, realizing he has exactly 1 month before the zombie apocalypse kicks off. He connects Morgana's plot to the wave of death, just as his new intern Charlotte interrupts him. Charlotte offers to help with his research, completely unaware she's handling forbidden necromancy texts. Alan awkwardly hands over the evil book, still not used to his new, overly dedicated sidekick. He internally notes that Charlotte has been showing up for unpaid labor every single day. Alan lists all the chores Charlotte does for free, wondering if he's exploiting her. He is. He lazily concludes she'll get bored and leave, completely misjudging her obsessive loyalty. A villager named Grill confirms he has adopted Charlotte, giving her a new family. Alan gives a rare, genuine smile, admitting the villager is a good guy. 3 Imperial Knights arrive, their dramatic entrance signaling Alan's vacation is officially cancelled. The lead Imperial Knight gives an intimidating stare, officially ending Alan's vacation. Alan is caught completely off guard by the Knight's sudden appearance while trying to relax. The Vice Commander, Harmon Diane, skips the pleasantries and immediately asks about the witch Morgana. Alan internally notes Harmon's disrespect, confirming his exile status is being taken very seriously. He realizes the Knight's quick arrival means they've been spying on him this whole time. Alan correctly identifies the Knights as the royal babysitters sent to watch his every move. Alan confirms the story, taking credit for the capture alongside his disposable villagers. Harmon recites the official report, which hilariously misidentifies Alan's zombie army as villagers. The report claims they killed the king of gluttony with farm tools, a detail that confuses Alan. Harmon credits a villager named Drill for killing 30 zombies, leaving Alan completely baffled. Alan internally regrets complimenting Grill, who immediately created a ridiculously false narrative for the Knights. Harmon admits he initially thought the report of farmers defeating a demon bear was an exaggeration. Alan internally scolds the Holy Knight for being gullible enough to believe the villagers' tall tale. Alan sarcastically confirms he knew about the Dark Church, since Morgana wasn't exactly subtle about it. Harmon gravely explains that the Dark Church is a notoriously vicious organization, stating the obvious. He reveals Morgana's impressive body count, confirming she single-handedly destroyed 5 entire villages. Alan has a moment of shock, realizing he casually defeated a mass-murdering witch while trying to slack off. Alan deflects Harmon's questions by reminding him of the official story where the villagers beat her to death. He plays the weak prince card when asked directly, while Charlotte gives him a judging side-eye. Alan internally decides to let the villagers take the credit to protect his secret necromancer identity. Alan continues his pathetic act, claiming he was just a bystander during the whole ordeal. He dramatically pretends he was so scared he almost wet himself, much to Charlotte's confusion. Harmon is visibly disgusted by the prince's award-winning cowardice, which is exactly the point. Alan pivots the conversation, asking about the witch's magic books with a look of pure innocence. He internally gloats about looting the books while Harmon explains their mission to retrieve them. Alan shamelessly blames the villagers, suggesting they probably burned the ominous books he actually stole. Harmon presents Alan with a heavy sack, changing the subject to his reward for services rendered. Alan is stunned to see the bag is full of gold, the 80 gold bounty for the witch he defeated. He humbly accepts the reward money, playing the part of the reluctant hero who did his duty. Alan promises to share the gold, while internally celebrating his new library and fat stacks of cash. Alan dramatically wipes his face with his new bag of gold as Harmon sighs in disgust. He tries to dismiss the knight, eager to get back to his paid vacation and stolen books. Harmon ruins Alan's day by telling him to pack, much to Alan's evil delight and Charlotte's shock. The knight explains they're evacuating him for the wave of death, which Alan complains is just another exile. Alan naively assumes the royal family is evacuating him out of concern, completely missing the point. He asks if he's going to the palace or the south, but Harmond bluntly crushes his tropical dreams. Harmond informs Alan he's being relocated to the Lonia estate, a place that sounds suspiciously like work. Alan questions the logic of moving to another frozen hellscape, but Harmond insists there's a point. The Lonia estate is revealed to be a fortress, and Alan finally realizes this is not a promotion. Harmond explains they've gathered soldiers and prisoners, confirming Alan is being sent to the front lines. Harmond grimly confirms there will be many casualties, which is a polite way of saying, everyone dies. He tells Alan to handle the funerals, helpfully including a visual of zombies ripping people apart. Alan and Charlotte share a moment of horrified realization that this isn't an evacuation, it's a death sentence. The local lord, Jennard, greets them with a system scan revealing he's merciful, a terrible trait for this job. Alan bluntly informs the welcoming committee that he's not feeling good about being sent to die. He complains about the uncomfortable carriage ride because physical discomfort is his top priority. Alan internally questions the nice treatment while Charlotte's new dad, Grill, hypes her up as someone great. He immediately starts ordering people around, demanding his room so he can continue his pity party in private. The narration reveals the Lonia estate is also called the Land of the Dead Spirits, which sounds cozy. The fortress's other nickname is Sacrificial Fortress, just in case the first one was too subtle. The narration explains the fortress is a month-long zombie containment zone for angry spirits. A visual of the zombie horde confirms seeing spring is the optimistic prize for not being eaten. Alan observes the prisoner soldiers, the designated cannon fodder for the upcoming apocalypse. Harmond assigns Alan the safe job of Undertaker, a perfect cover for a secret necromancer. Alan internally smirks as Harmond reveals the annual casualty count is a necromancer's recruitment goal. Harmond mentions 80 priests are on hand, a laughably small number for the coming horde. Harmond casually dismisses death by overwork, confirming the HR department here is non-existent. Alan turns to the local Lord Jennard, preparing to launch into his useless prince routine. Alan immediately drops all pretense of royalty and screams for alcohol like a frat boy. He throws a tantrum, declaring he'd rather die from drinking than from working too hard. Alan dismisses Charlotte and her new dad Grill, telling them to go have fun. He reminds Charlotte to be back before the apocalypse starts, still clutching his booze. Alan shamelessly tells Charlotte her job is to protect him, weaponizing his pathetic act. He makes a dramatic exit to his room, leaving everyone to deal with his tantrum. Jennard offers encouragement while Harmond correctly assesses that the prince has not matured at all. The second the door closes, Alan drops the act and congratulates himself on his performance. He reveals the alcohol was just a prop, as he has no intention of actually drinking. Alan uses his holy power to transmute the wine because of course he can do that. The cheap wine is instantly purified into sparkling, high-grade holy water. He decides to stockpile his homemade holy water, turning his props into survival gear. Alan decides to mass-produce holy water, rebranding it as his personal apocalypse energy drink. He realizes making holy water doubles as power leveling before getting distracted by a shiny object. Alan puts down his holy water project, his attention completely stolen by the wall decor. He spots a rifle mounted on the wall, because of course there's a Chekhov's gun. Alan takes down the gun, noting that nobody uses them in this sword and sorcery world. A helpful visual explains that guns are generally useless against the local monster population. The narration confirms guns are basically just expensive wall art in this universe. Alan reveals the guns are mana-powered, but they're massive energy hogs. He explains the terrible stats, 5 shots for a wizard and a 5-minute reload time per bullet. Alan inspects the rifle, disappointed it's not the zombie headshot machine from the movies. Alan experiments with the useless rifle, trying to manifest a bullet with his holy power. He imagines a perfect zombie headshot, completely ignoring the fact that he's indoors. Alan fires the rifle, unleashing a cannon blast that sends him flying backward from the recoil. The system confirms he just invented holy bullets, a discovery he makes while flat on his back. He immediately regrets his experiment after blowing a massive hole in the fortress wall. Harmond, the royal babysitter, looks predictably annoyed by the sudden, loud explosion. 2 soldiers gossip about Harmond's bad mood, stating the absolute obvious to each other. The soldiers correctly guess Alan is the source of his stress right before Harmond interrupts them. Harmond gives a terrifyingly polite reminder that gossiping on the job is a very bad idea. Harmond internally admits the useless prince is exactly why he's so incredibly stressed out. Harmond begins his investigation into the explosion, clearly not buying the nothing happened routine. Alan tries to deflect with a pathetic, sensitive teenager act, which Harmond is not buying for a second. Harmond finds the massive hole in the wall, confirming the prince is a one-man demolition crew. He recalls the villagers claiming Alan changed, a story that clashes with his current destructive behavior. The villagers' flashback continues, painting Alan as a hero who saved them all from zombies. Harmond dismisses their testimony, assuming Alan blackmailed them into creating his fake hero narrative. He can't connect the dots between the pathetic prince and the capture of a high-level necromancer. Harmond lands on the only logical conclusion: the villager Grill must be a secret super warrior. He decides to recruit the legendary farmer Grill, completely buying into the ridiculous cover story. Annoyed by yet another disturbance, Harmond assumes it's just the prisoner soldiers fighting again. A random knight makes the mistake of trying to discipline Alan for his expert-level slacking. The knight's face registers the exact moment he realizes he's yelling at the prince. Alan immediately puts the knight on the ground with his shovel, re-establishing the pecking order. A flashback shows Alan pulling the "Do you know who I am" card because of course he did. The next day at the Lonia estate, the mood is officially set to frozen hellscape. Alan is already digging graves as people die from overwork, his safe job in full swing. He complains about being exploited while wearing a fancy, magically purified plague doctor mask. Alan gets bored of burying bodies and impatiently waits for the zombie apocalypse to finally start. Some new guy interrupts Alan's brooding, clearly looking to start some trouble. A system scan introduces Heis Hedron, a smug noble who invites Alan to join his clique. Heis Hedron condescendingly assumes Alan is a student from the academy, establishing himself as the new antagonist. Heis smugly asks if Alan is serving disciplinary action, clearly trying to assert his social dominance. Heis's goons mock Alan as a country bumpkin, while Alan internally seethes at their arrogance. A lackey name drops Heis's father, Count Hedron, as if that's supposed to impress the exiled prince. Heis reveals he's at the Death Fortress to find a maid, because priorities are for poor people. Heis spots Charlotte and decides she's his target, a decision he's definitely going to regret. Heis asks if Charlotte is Alan's maid, completely ignoring her existence as a person. Heis begins bragging about a bitch he cornered at the academy, revealing his charming personality. Heis casually admits to assaulting a woman who rejected him, thoroughly disgusting Alan. Alan immediately walks away, deciding digging graves is better than spending another second with these clowns. Heis Hedron calls out to Charlotte like she's property, getting Alan's immediate, unenthusiastic attention. Charlotte asks if the spoiled noble is talking to her, and Heis smugly orders her to come over. Heis grabs Charlotte's wrist, making the classic villain mistake of underestimating the pint-sized bodyguard. He invites Charlotte to play with them, spilling her basket and sealing his fate in the process. Heis condescendingly reminds the commoner of her place after she dares to refuse his creepy advances. Charlotte grabs Heis's wrist, showing off the super strength she's been developing to protect her useless prince. She twists Heis's arm until he screams, while Alan internally calculates the odds of it breaking. Heis calls her a monstrous bitch in pain, prompting Alan to finally step in and stop the show. Heis makes the fatal mistake of insulting Charlotte's dead parents, which is a line you just don't cross. Alan delivers a cold threat, reminding Heis that this place has a high zombie turnover rate. Alan threatens Heis with his shovel, promising to turn his entire family into zombies. Heis flinches as Alan slams his glowing shovel into the ground, narrowly missing him. The shovel is left embedded in the cracked earth, a clear and silent warning. Alan plays dumb, claiming his near-fatal shovel swing was just a grave-digging accident. Heis doesn't buy it, so Alan punches him in the face and calls it another slip-up. The spoiled noble goes flying as his lackeys can only watch in complete shock. Alan pins Heis to the ground with his foot, completely unimpressed by his sputtering threats. Alan leans in and drops his signature line, asking the terrified noble if he knows who he is. Harmond arrives just in time, already exhausted by the prince's tendency for accidents. Heiss cries to the knight for help, screaming his full title like it's a get-out-of-jail-free card. Harmon declares he can't ignore the situation, ready to lecture the prince for his latest violent outburst. Alan casually drops a massive holy power spell, silencing everyone in the vicinity with magical chains. Harmon is left completely speechless, his brain rebooting after witnessing the useless prince's true power. The knight realizes he literally cannot speak, confirming he's been caught in Alan's silencing spell. Harmon correctly identifies the holy incantation, just as Alan calls his name with chilling authority. Alan orders his stunned babysitter to tell the noble punk exactly who he's messing with. The atmosphere becomes incredibly tense as the power dynamic between the prince and knight flips completely. A very intimidated Harmon finally manages to stammer out the prince's name under duress. Harmon gives Heiss the full royal introduction, who now looks like he's seen a ghost from the ground. Alan condescendingly asks Heiss if he finally understands whose authority he just challenged. Heiss stammers on the ground, absolutely terrified after learning who he just messed with. Alan offers a benevolent smile, promising no big problems if the apology is sincere enough. The next scene shows Alan locked in a cell, looking completely unbothered by his new accommodations. Harmon explains Heiss fainted and was carried off, landing Alan in jail for assaulting a noble. Harmon apologizes for the week-long probation, which Alan accepts as a paid reading vacation. Alan cheerfully declares that being locked up is actually a welcome break from his responsibilities. Meanwhile, a blizzard rages outside the fortress, as a soldier reports to Vice Commander Harmon. Harmon sweats nervously, still reeling from the holy incantation the useless prince casually used. He questions if Alan's power is just raw talent, since the prince is supposed to be a good-for-nothing. A soldier snaps Harmon out of his existential crisis over the prince's secret OP status. Harmon discusses the mundane task of clearing snow from the walls with a soldier. The soldier notes the suspiciously low number of zombies, recalling the Undead King's death anniversary is December 25th. Harmon decides to report the eerie calm and orders the prisoners to be gathered for a scouting mission. A soldier rings a massive bell, officially kicking off the "Let's send prisoners to die" portion of the day. The fortress gates open, releasing the designated cannon fodder into the blizzard to check for monsters. The scene cuts to bloody footprints in the snow, confirming the scouting party met a predictable end. A massive evolved zombie is shown eating a soldier, revealing the quiet was just the appetizer course.